All right, so we're joined by my high school classmate, my friend for nearly 30 years, Michelle Dugan. We thank you so much for joining us, the owner and founder of Mississippi Lending, one of the authorities here in the city of Jackson in the metro area on mortgage lending. So we thank you so much for joining us. I got a room full here with me at Velma Jackson. This is for our personal finance class. And we're recording this for all of our friends at Madison Central, Ridgeland High School, Germantown High School, the Academic Options Center, and our YouTube channel. And we thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. I can't even explain how lucky all of y'all are to get to have Greg as your teacher.
Well, I appreciate that. And obviously we're going to talk a lot about how mortgage works, how you guys work when it comes to buying homes, buying land, buying a business. But we really talk about educational paths. So take us back to, we went to Madison Central together, graduated 2000. Take us through after high school, your college path, because you didn't follow the traditional path that some people take.
I did not. So I graduated from high school and got started on the college path. I actually had hopes and wanted to be an attorney. So I went to ended up finishing my undergrad at Mississippi College. I was kind of a cross-listed major, political science and history, but it was one less class to have a history degree than a political science degree. So I went with history, got accepted into law school, and was waiting to start law school. And that was my path. That's what I was going to do. And while I was going through undergrad, I was working for a local real estate attorney. And I had a mortgage broker that I worked with a lot that would send business to our firm, and we were working together all the time. And he convinced me to get my license to be able to do mortgages because I was referring a lot of business to him. And I didn't understand why I would want to get my license or why I would want to do that, because I was headed to law school. And then pretty much right about the same time that all of this is happening, I found out that I was pregnant with my first son. And so, or my oldest son rather. And so I kind of freaked out a little bit because I didn't know how I would handle a newborn baby and law school. So I decided to defer law school for a year, got into the mortgage business, and it was just kind of a part-time thing. I was still working at the law firm, and then I was just doing mortgages kind of on the side. And then the next thing I knew, I was making more money from my part-time mortgage job than I was at the law firm. So I decided that I would jump over and just do that full time until I went back to law school. And to be honest, I started doing really well and became successful at it pretty quickly. And I decided, you know what, I can always go to law school. It will always be there. But for now, I'm going to stick with this job that's paying me well, and it's giving me a lot of, time and time flexibility with having a child. And here, I guess 16 years later, I'm still doing the same thing. So
Yeah,
I've never decided to go back to law school after that.
and also an entrepreneur, and we'll get to entrepreneurship here in a little while as well. Now, one thing I was talking about with the class before we came online is that I know in high school it's hard to wrap your mind around these things when you're 15, 16, 17, 18 years old. You're just thinking about, I want to get out of high school, maybe do the college thing, but this is something you're going to have to deal with at some point, unless you have a few $100,000 sitting around. You're going to have to deal with a mortgage lender before you take any steps to buying a home, to buying a piece of land. Up here in Madison County, a lot of people buy land for hunting or a developer, across the street from Velma Jackson, somebody bought some land to sell the lumber off of. So you want to buy to buy an office building. If you want to do any of that before you can ever think about getting a realtor, you have to deal with a mortgage lender. So when they come and talk to a mortgage lender, what are the things they need to be, first of all, what do they need to plan for, and what do they need to expect, and what are some things that they can, start doing now to be ready for that?
Honestly, well, the biggest thing you can start doing right now is being aware of your credit score. So I would imagine for a lot of y'all sitting in that class, you probably don't have anything that would be reporting to credit yet, but I can almost guarantee you that the day you turn 18 or very soon after, you're going to start getting flooded with credit card offers and different things. And especially if you do decide to go to college, and that's the path that you take, I know that college students get inundated with credit card offers, and it can be really enticing to say, oh yeah, these people want to give me, a $500 credit limit. I can go shopping. But every single payment that you make or don't make, and how much you borrow on those credit card accounts from the very first day, will impact your credit score. I mean, and it can impact it for years and years to come. So, it's always a good thing to be very aware of where your credit is and what's reporting to your credit, because there's all sorts of things that can get on there. If you move out of your home when you're 18 or after you graduate from high school and you get your own apartment, if you have a utility account of any sort associated with that, or even just the rent on the apartment alone, if you stop paying those bills, it will report to your credit. So it's always that's first and foremost, you want to make sure that your credit, that you understand where your credit scores are. Thankfully for all of y'all, there are tons of services out there that will show you what your credit score is. You can get an annual credit report for free every year too, but we didn't have those when I was buying my first house. It was really truly a mystery, essentially, of where your credit score was. But that's the first thing that you're going to want to do, is just have an idea of where your credit score is and what that looks like, and just always be cognizant. I can never stress enough, just always pay your bills on time. Don't borrow more money than you need, and do whatever it takes to make sure that those bills, especially the ones that are getting reported to your credit report, are always paid on time. Because you could pay everything on time for years and years, and then you could have 2 late payments, and all of a sudden your credit score is 150 points lower. And that credit score will definitely drive as far as what you are able to qualify for, and then the different programs that you can qualify for as well. So first and foremost, credit score. The next thing is that we're always going to look at your last 2 years of employment history, or combination of employment history and schooling. So for example, like if you go to college and then you graduate and you start a new job and you want to look into buying a home, then they're going to use those last 2 years of your college, like basically college education, in place of work history. So you may only be working for a month or two, but you're going to have the 2 years of history that they require. Unfortunately, they will not use high school as those 2 years. But if if you started working during high school and then you you went to a trade school, or you ended up choosing a career that you can get into right after high school, where you're making enough to where you would want to purchase a home possibly, they'll let you use that 2 year history, even though you were in high school, because you started working before you graduated, essentially. But you're going to have at least 2 years of history there. And then, and then everything else. I think Greg was telling me that y'all had some conversations about debt to income ratios and things like that earlier, which is always good. It's never too soon to start thinking about that, because if you have dreams of, having this kind of home one day, or living here one day, how much you make, and what your income is going to dictate what you're able to afford down the road. And they're not going to let you use all of your income to qualify. They're only going to let you qualify, based on a part of it, essentially, because they want to make sure that you have some money left over at the end of the month.
Yeah, and we
Which
also
is
talked about that too, because you got to look at, if you're moving from a small apartment to a large home, your utilities are going to be higher. So you may be paying an X amount in utilities now. You go to a 3-bedroom home, you're going to have a higher light bill. You're going to have a higher water bill. There's going to be gas, and there's going to be the HOA fees. There's going to be the homeowner's insurance. So there's so many other costs.
There's so many
on top
things.
of the mortgage payment you would have every month, and that's what the lenders
That's
are
right.
looking at.
Exactly. And, it's funny because a lot of the times when people come in and they'll, start, especially first time home buyers, and they're like, well, hey, how much can we afford? What's the most that we can buy? And I'm the lender that never really wants to tell them what that number is, because more often than not, the most that you can buy and the maximum that you can qualify for is typically going to be more than most people are going to actually want to pay for their mortgage payment. So I do things a little bit differently, and we kind of work backwards into the number. And instead of saying this is the most that you can qualify for, we'll say, okay, this is what you want to qualify for, or this is what you want to buy, so that your payment is in the range that you want it to be in. Because I never want my clients to call me, 6 months or a year later and say, Michelle, why did you let me buy that house? Because there's so much that comes along with it. Just like you said, higher bills. There's, keeping up the yard. What if your air conditioner goes out? What if your refrigerator stops working? There's always expenses that come along with homeownership. But because of the way that real estate appreciation happens in our country, it's always worth it to buy, because especially over the last 5 years, we have seen real estate here in central Mississippi appreciate and go up in value just exponentially. Would have never imagined that we had seen the increases in values that we have in some places. So,
especially in Madison County.
yes, exactly.
Uh,
Exactly. Especially rural Madison County.
Absolutely. Now, another thing too is, when you talk about qualifying for the mortgage, having some money, having a few thousand saved up can also help that rate. So,
Yes.
it's okay to rent for a short amount of time, or if we still have some that they still live at home for a few years. If that
Mm-hmm.
allows you to save $5, 6, 7, 8, $10,000, that can
Yes.
bring that mortgage rate down, because that's part of the thing
Mm-hmm.
the lenders are going to be looking at to see how you qualify.
Yeah, 100%. So the interest rate it impacts your payment, your monthly payment tremendously. Right now, interest rates are higher than they have been probably the last 20 years or so. So it's been a little bit of a struggle, because we went from a time frame where we had historically low interest rates. And then within a year, now we are hitting some of the highest rates that we've seen in the last 20 years. What that has done to the real estate market is that it has slowed down the home sales. They're actually at about a 30-year low right now. Doesn't mean that they're losing value by any means. We're still seeing values hold strong in this area. We just don't have as many buyers in the market that are purchasing. And simply a lot of it is because home values have gone up so much. And then now when you're combining that with the higher interest rates, it's just not quite as affordable for a lot of people as it was. But there's a lot of options that are out there for that too. One, just because you buy a house right away does not mean that you cannot refinance into a lower rate down the road. But there's also programs where you can do temporary buy downs on your interest rate. There's programs where the seller can help pay some concessions to help buy down your interest rate. You can buy your own interest rate down. Whenever we're looking at that with our buyers, we've got different formulas that we look at to explain whether it makes sense to actually buy the interest rate down or not. And then, like Greg mentioned too, if you do happen to be living at home with parents for a while trying to save up money, the best way, in my opinion, to be able to do that is decide what you feel like you would be comfortable making your mortgage payment for every month, and every single month, put that exact amount into a savings account. It's going to just prepare you for making that payment. It's going to help you save up any funds that you may need towards a down payment or closing cost. And then, to me, it's homework. If you want to, if you want to buy a home, you got to do a little work to get there. And paying that mortgage payment to yourself into the form of, into a savings account every month is one of the best ways to be able to do that.
Yeah, and look, I understand that some of the stuff may be confusing for a high school student. It may even be confusing for an adult. But I think it's important to understand that people like you, that our lenders are there to make sure that you understand everything.
That's
So,
right.
the main thing I want everybody to understand is that this isn't something to be afraid of. This is something you're going to have to deal with, and something you're going to have to be at least familiar with. But it's important now to start taking steps to prepare yourself mentally and financially for that. So, I hear kids all the time have these dreams, and I'm all for it, and I'm going to support them. But at the end of the day, you got to be able to financially support those dreams.
That's right. And the good thing is that, most people don't stay in their first home forever. But the sooner that you can become a homeowner and start building up some equity, the sooner you can, move towards getting those dream homes that you want one day. Greg and I have some friends that we went to high school with, and I did their first mortgages, 15, 16 years ago. And now they have moved up over the years, and they are living in their dream homes. Some of them are teachers and coaches right here, that work for Madison County schools, and they're living in big, beautiful homes that you wouldn't normally think that a teacher or a coach may be living in. But because they started early and have saved and just done really, basically been smart with their finances, they've been able to move right into those dreams that they had. So I'm a huge believer that anybody can do it. You've just got to have the will and the drive and the want to do it. So
yeah. Now, one thing I also want to talk about is even if somebody's not interested in the mortgage business, we have a lot of students, and I know I can speak for the other teachers that'll see this later. We have a lot of students in Madison County schools that say they want to be entrepreneurs because they
Yes.
want to work for themselves. And I know a few years ago, you made the decision to open your own business and start to work for yourself. Now,
Yes.
we have an entrepreneurship class as well, but I think it's important to talk about that because I think a lot of people, they see the social media fun side of entrepreneurship. They don't see the side that really takes a lot of work and has a huge learning curve.
Oh
Because
yeah.
I've had guests, for example, the owner, and I always use this as an example, the owner of Happy Tummy's GI Clinic in Flowood is one
Yeah.
of the most well-known pediatric GI doctors in the country. But
Yep.
she told me out of her own mouth, I wish I'd have known what I was getting into because I had no idea how to run a business.
Right.
What type of learning curve do you have? Because you can have a great product, you can be great, have great customer service skills, you can actually be great with money, but you can still
Yeah.
fail at running a business. So if
Yes.
young people, and we have some students now that are already running their own small business. So if
Yeah.
somebody wants to go into business for themselves, what are some things they need to be aware of, and what are some tips? Because it's not just an instant money, instant riches.
It is not. So the first thing that I think a lot of people need to do is they need to understand how taxes work, federal taxes specifically, because that's what probably one of the biggest things that I see when reviewing people's tax returns, whether they are currently self-employed or whether they have been in the past, is that there's a lot of people that think, they have this idea, oh, I'm going to start this small business, but they don't like plan for the tax side of it. And whether that is saving to pay the taxes when it comes tax time, or just with the structure of their company, whether it's structured properly to save them on taxes. So that's something I think that is really important when you do want to have a small business. And sometimes you don't need to have a fancy business structure when you're just starting out, but once you get to the point that you're making several $1,000s a month at least, you want to have a conversation with an accountant to see if the way that you have your business set up is the most ideal for your business. Because having it in an LLC, which is essentially it's a pass-through entity, so you're going to pay taxes a little bit different than you would if you were just a sole proprietor. You're going to have a little bit more protection in the event that anything ever happened and somebody came along to sue you. It's going to save you on some self-employment taxes. So it makes sense for a lot of people. But then there's also there's other forms of having a business, corporations, something that's called an S corporation, where essentially you're an LLC, but you're taxed differently than a normal LLC. So having the right business structure is really important. Making sure that you're prepared for a rainy day in business is always important. It's
Yeah,
really
look at COVID.
easy to, yeah, it's really easy to make some money and then spend it and assume that you're going to just continue to make the same amount or higher all the time. But you've always got to put some away to prepare for those times when something may happen. What if something happens to you physically and you're unable to run your company? What if something changes in the market or the type of business that you're working in that impacts your business in ways that were unforeseen? So saving for taxes, saving for a rainy day are huge. And there's tons of resources out there for business owners. There's definitely a lot that I did not know entirely when I opened my own company too. Thankfully, I'd had some experience running some small businesses, and then also when I was working for the law firm, we did a lot of work helping set up companies for other people. So I did have that benefit of being familiar with that, but there's just still a lot that goes into a business: licensing, permitting that you may not be aware of. So, you really can't start researching too soon. And thankfully, like Google and the internet is so incredible these days, because just about anything that you want to learn, you can find out there. You can find somebody that has a similar business and maybe doing something in a different state completely that will help mentor you, and that you can help, that you can shadow under to learn. And that's something that I did a lot. I had friends that were opening companies across the country, and they were a huge resource for me because they had already been through a lot of the same stuff that I was going to go through. And so, they didn't see me as a competitor necessarily, because I'm only lending in Mississippi, and they're in California, Colorado, Pennsylvania, all over the country, literally. And so they would just open their books basically and just share whatever I wanted to know and needed to know about my business, which that was priceless for me. Because you don't always have to completely reinvent the wheel just because you're opening a business from start,
Yeah.
or from scratch rather.
Yeah. And, a lot of people are attracted to the fact I can be my own boss, but they don't understand the amount of hours that it does take. So I think that's important to
Yes.
understand for everybody. Obviously everybody's not
Yep.
going to be a mortgage lender, but we do have
Yep.
several aspiring entrepreneurs. And I think that is, just vital to understand the financial and emotional and physical strain it does take to be an entrepreneur. But there
Yeah, no
are, like
doubt.
you said, there are grants. They have grants for minority business owners. They have grants for women. They have
Yep.
grants for immigrants. So there are tons of government programs that can aid in that. But you
Yep.
still have to put in the work. And it is when you are the only person, every decision, every action has to go through you.
That's right. And, I'm a big believer that time is our most valuable resource because once it's gone, we can literally never get it back. So, for a lot of people that want to start their own business, a lot of it too is looking at the hours. Okay. Am I willing to work 60, 80 hours a week for months, maybe years to get this off the ground to where it's, going to definitely be successful? A lot of times when you open a small business, you may not be able to hire employees to help you for a while. And yeah, you've got to be willing to put that time in. And sometimes the amount of money that you're going to make for the amount of time you're putting in isn't going to be nearly what you could make if you were working for somebody else. But you always, if you're looking at a 1 year plan, a 5 year plan, and you're able to stick to that, then, I'm a big proponent of, of being self-employed and having your own businesses. But a lot of that is because, yes, you can have a lot of freedom that comes along with it. Like today, I'm having lunch with my mom, so I'm at her house and sitting in her dining room today. But it's not always that way. There's been, during COVID, things got really crazy in the mortgage industry, and I was at the office every day around 8 or 9 a.m. and I would work until 1 or 2 a.m. Then the next morning, essentially, just to be able to get all the work done. And I had an office full of people, and I had a lot of support staff, but there was just simply so much work that had to be done. And at the end of the day, it all fell back on me. So you gotta be willing to put in the time for sure.
Yeah, and something else you did that I think is smart is you didn't just jump into it. You learned the business first. So I think it's
Yes.
good if you want to be an entrepreneur, be an employee first, so you can
Yeah.
learn and see how things are done. So I think you did a great job of that as
Yes.
well.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine having jumped off into this not knowing anything about mortgages or running a business or how it all worked. But I see it, and I see people that do it and they're successful. I mean, it's like anything else, kind of trial by fire.
All right. Well, I do got some questions from the students. I get to as many as
Yeah.
I can. This person is Alexander Williams. He's a senior, and he asked, "What is the main obstacle you have faced while starting your own business?"
The main obstacle, honestly, for me was knowing when to hire and when to scale up with my business. So, like I said, when I opened my own company in 2019, and then at the beginning of 2020 was when things got really crazy with COVID, and so I was working around the clock. And the one thing with the mortgage business is that it always seems to kind of be a little bit of a roller coaster. Like it'll be really busy and then it'll slow down, and then it's really busy again, and then it'll slow down. So it's always hard to know when to hire people, so that you have enough staff to be able to get all of the work done right now, but that you're not having to lay people off later whenever things slow down. So I think that's probably been one of the biggest struggles for me, was just knowing and being able to anticipate the business and knowing what we needed as far as staffing, because everything can change literally in 1 month's time. So
Yeah, and that's a great segue to this question. This is Anarian Mayfield. He's a senior, one of our football players here, and he asked, "When is the best time to buy a house?"
there's really not a great time to buy a house. So in the past, well, I don't mean that. There's not a bad time to buy a house, rather. It's always a good time, in my opinion. But in the past, typically, you would see the real estate market slow down a little bit after school started in the fall. So between like fall and, I would say between like maybe September and December of every year, things will be a little bit slower. So you might be able to find a little bit more of a deal, or you might find sellers that were willing to give more concessions to help pay, for closing costs and things like that. Now, there's such a shortage of homes in our area, really throughout the country, that anytime that you can find a home and get under contract is a good time to buy. Even though interest rates are higher right now than they were historically, it's still a great time to buy because there's still so much demand for homes. And quite honestly, I don't know how they're ever really going to truly be able to catch up. Yes, they could start building a ton of homes, but it's just simply doesn't work that way. So there's going to be a shortage for a while, which is going to end, which is basically only going to continue to drive up the prices of real estate and homes. So there's really no good time anymore. Like it's always, or no great time. I guess it's just always a good time to buy anymore.
Yeah, and I mean, and again, I'm far from an expert, but in my opinion, I think it's important to also be patient because you
Yes.
have people, especially when you have people who pass away, the family may be just looking to get rid of the property. They're not really looking to make
Hmm.
a profit off of it. So you may be
Yep.
able to find things at a much lower rate just because you waited a few weeks and wanted to make sure you could afford something.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I have just this morning I met with a couple and their rent, or I guess the place that they're renting, they have the lease through March, but they're going to go ahead and start, they want to go ahead and do their pre-approval now so that if something did pop up on the market, they were ready. If not, they're going to probably wait, 60 to 90 days, but you just never really know what the seller's going through as well. Some of them they may want a transaction where they're closed and done in 30 days. Some may be building a new home themselves and they want to go ahead and get something under contract, but they don't want to close for 90 or 120 days. And so, every situation is different, but the sooner you start, the better you can plan and you don't have to just rush into something.
Absolutely. This is Harmony Williams. She's our dance team captain and our homecoming queen here at Velma.
Awesome.
And she asked, would it be a good idea to rent before I decided to buy a home?
I don't think that it's a bad idea to rent. So there's two different, ways to look at it. With renting, it's going to give you that, you're going to be able to see what it feels like to make those payments every month when it comes to, because for a lot of people, their rent looks similar to what their mortgage would down the road. And you can get used to paying utilities and paying your rent and keeping up a home and just seeing what expenses come along with that. On the flip side, the longer that you stay at home and you don't have to pay that rent, the more that you can save up and be ready when you do buy a home. So I don't think that there's a wrong answer for that. The only downside I would say is that some people do have a little bit harder time saving up money when they're renting than they would if they were staying at home or living somewhere for free. But you're going to get, valuable experience either way you go. You just may not be able to save up quite as much as fast when you're renting first.
But it will, like you said, it does give you a
Yeah.
tick on your credit, so that it can help with that.
Oh,
So
yeah, for
let's
sure.
get two more. This is David Ford. He's a junior member of our football and bowling team. Kind of an interesting combo there.
Oh,
And
cool.
he asked, when I buy a home, what is the importance of finding the right mortgage lender?
Well, that's a great question. So I think first and foremost, the most important thing is finding somebody that you get along with well, somebody that it's easy for you to communicate with. Because just like Greg said, when you are buying a home, you want to know that your questions are going to be answered. You want it to be a pleasant experience. You want it to, you want to be comfortable with the process so that you understand what's happening because you're borrowing a lot of money and you need to know what it's going to be to repay it. You want to know what all these terms are. And I promise you're going to see a lot of terminology that you've never seen or heard before when you go through the mortgage process. So first and foremost is just making sure that you're working with somebody who that you feel comfortable with, who you can communicate easily with. And then on top of that is just making sure that whoever you're working with has your best interest in mind when it comes to what you're paying for closing costs and to obtain that mortgage. So for a company like myself, we are a mortgage broker. So we work with tons of different mortgage lenders across the country so that we can shop around on your interest rate and find you the best deal. We're a small company, so we keep our overhead costs low, but that's not always the same for everybody. Sometimes you're working with really big companies and, a lot of times these companies that have the biggest marketing budgets are the ones that you may see and hear about the most. But typically, if they have huge marketing budgets and you're hearing about them all the time and you're seeing them on TV all the time, there's a reason for that. And that money comes from somewhere. And it's not just because they do a lot of mortgages. A lot of times they have higher rates and fees. So I always encourage anybody, even if I'm working with them, I'm never going to be upset if somebody wants to shop around on their mortgage and make sure that they're getting a good deal. But, I can sleep well at night because I know that we are taking great care of our customers and that we are getting them good deals. But really finding somebody that you can work with, that you're comfortable with, somebody that's familiar with the area that you want to buy in is
Oh yeah.
really huge too, because there's a lot of call center loan officers that work in other parts of the country that have no idea. They don't know anything about Madison County, Mississippi. And so they'll give you bad advice on how much you need to save and what your process may look like here, simply because they aren't familiar with it. Mississippi is a little bit unique. And of course, I love it here, which is why I've continued to make it my home. But sometimes these out of state lenders just don't really know exactly what's going on here. So I think local lenders always awesome. And then just like I said, finding somebody that you get along with and that you would want to work with, because usually it's going to be a 2, 3, maybe 4 month process, just depending on how long it takes to find a home. So you want it to be somebody that you can put up with for that amount of time too.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it. All right, I just got one more. This is Gabriel G. He's a senior, another one of our football players. And he asked, what would be the best way for me to start now to be able to purchase my dream home?
Honestly, start soon. Because every single month, like once you purchase a home, every single month that you make your mortgage payment, not only are you paying back the interest that you owe to the bank, but you're paying yourself, and because of the home appreciating and building up equity. And the sooner that you can do that, the more equity you're going to build over time. And then you can take the equity from that home and you can roll it into another one, and then another one and another one down the road. And I have some clients that came to me, like I said, almost, I guess, 16 years ago and bought their first home. And over time, they're just continuing to roll over their equity from one home to the next. So their mortgage payment's not even increasing all that much, but they're cashing out on the equity that they have, moving up in properties. And they went from, 1,500 square foot homes to 5,000 square foot homes. But, because you're in theory, your income should increase over time, and then your equity is going to increase over time. But the sooner that you get started, the sooner that you can meet those goals for sure.
Awesome. Well, we're almost out of time. And as always, we thank you so much for joining us. But I just got two things I got to ask you before we go. One funny and one serious. We've known each other almost 30 years now, and these kids love making fun of me. And I think that's part of the territory. But as somebody who has known me literally since I was 12 years old, can you attest that I am pretty much the exact same goofy person I have been since middle school?
Yes, 100%. Yep.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm glad, they get to hear from somebody that's known me a long time to see that I'm actually
A long time.
Um,
He's one of the best, y'all.
well, I appreciate it. But the last thing I wanted to ask before we go, I think it's important, for the people that are here with me now and the kids that'll see this later, we went to Madison Central. Nobody ever took the time to go over this with us. We were not taught this, and it's not that they didn't care. It's just the trends in education have changed. So,
Sure.
When you're in high school, you may not think this stuff's important. You're like, oh, I'm 15. I don't care about this. But this is something you're going to have to deal with at some point if you ever have these dreams of, we said purchasing a home, purchasing land, purchasing a building. So why is it so important now to pay attention to this type of stuff to set you up for success as you leave high school?
I mean, I think that every decision that you're making right now in school, if you want to go to college, then they're going to look at your grades from high school. And, that can impact what you get as far as scholarships. Getting scholarships and getting assistance to go to college is going to decrease what you have to borrow for student loans. I have a son who is a junior at Madison Central this year, and everything matters. Every single decision that you make, every grade that you make, it's in your permanent record now. So you may not even want to go to college, and that's completely fine too, because there's a ton of paths, which I know that Greg has been teaching you all about all year, where you don't even have to necessarily go to college, but every single thing that you do is going to impact you. So you have to be cognizant of that. You have to be cognizant of, where you want to end up. If you want to own $1 million home one day, then by all means, I hope that you have that dream and that you work towards it. But you may not get it, you may not be able to get that $1 million home if you have a job where you're only making X amount of money. You really have to think those things through. So if you want to be up here, then you need to look at what your career goals and your career aspirations are so that you know that, okay, by doing this, I'm going to have this path and my income's going to increase over time. Or maybe you don't want all those things and you want to keep life simple, and that is okay too. But it's just thinking about where you want to be one day and every little decision that you make impacting that, as you move along. I wouldn't wait until if you want to go to college, I don't recommend waiting until you're done with college to get your first job, because you may get into whatever you're doing and think, oh my gosh, why didn't anybody tell me it was going to be like this? So I'm a really big fan of like shadowing people in the industries that you want to work in, talking to people in the industries that you want to work in, because all of those things are what's going to impact your ability to purchase, how much you can purchase, where you're going to live, where you're going to raise a family one day, if you want to have a family one day. So it's just, you can't ever really start thinking about it too soon.
Yeah. And it's like I said, nobody told us this when we were in high school. So I really hope, those that are with me now and those see this later really at least get a few things to really start moving toward that area of their life, especially the seniors that are getting ready to graduate. Now, before we get, tell us where to find MS Lending.
Yes, you can find us. So on Facebook, we're under MF Lending LLC. We're on the same thing on Instagram. And then my website is mslending.net. We've got a bunch of resources on there. I have another website called michellelens.com. And on that website, there's just all kinds of videos about buying homes and educate you on terms and all of these different things. And if I can ever, help y'all in any way, answer any questions, anything at all, always, please don't ever hesitate to reach out, because yes, I love what I do and I love getting to work with my borrowers, but I really love getting to help educate younger kids too, and maybe have just a smidgen of an impact on your future too. So
all right. Well, as always, it's such a pleasure. Just such great information and just so passionate about it. And it's just so proud to call you a classmate. And, as always, so great talking to you. But Michelle Dugan, Mississippi Lending right there in Ridgeland. Thanks so much.
Awesome, guys. Thanks for having me. Happy Halloween.
Oh, yeah.